Hi, this is Carolyn,
And Cole,
and we're going to talk about what herbs are easiest to grow in your home.
and the best fruits to have when you're on a diabetic diet.
So we're going to start with the cardiac diet. Cardiac diet is really focused on helping you control your weight, your cholesterol, and your blood pressure. Patients might be eating lots of food and meeting their calorie goals, but not their nutrient goals. So it's important to teach your patients about having nutrient-rich or nutrient-dense foods that have a lot of minerals, proteins, whole grains, and other nutrients and vitamins in them. So make sure you teach them about eating lots of fruits and vegetables, whole grains, low-fat dairy products, poultry and fish without the skin because the skin tends to carry a lot of fat, nuts and legumes in portions. You don't want to eat a lot of them because they also have a lot of fat as well, and non-tropical vegetable oils. So those are like canola, corn, olive, soybean, peanut, sunflower, and safflower oils. You're really trying to avoid the palm and coconut oils. You're also going to try to limit sodium and salts, saturated and trans fats, red meat. You're going to make sure they're looking for the leanest cut. So on the back of a package, it's going to say like 90% lean meat, 95% lean meat. The higher percentage of lean meat, the less fat it has. And then you can also try to avoid sugar-sweetened beverages and sweets. So a lot of sugar-sweetened beverages are going to be your sodas, your juices, and iced tea you buy in the store. So how to flavor the food. So in the efforts to reduce salt and fat, which is in a lot of modern Western convenience diet, like convenience food, you're going to have to start cooking a lot more on your own. So you're going to try to use herbs and spices instead to give your food flavor instead of salt. So also you can add nuts for texture, and then also teas can also put in antioxidants in your diet and can be used as broths and sauces. Depending on what kind of herbs and spices you use, you can get a whole range of different flavors. You can have like chili pepper and garlic, which can give like a Mexican kind of feel to your food, and then you can also have ginger and cilantro, which are going to give you that kind of flavors from Asia. Also, a good way to reduce salt in your diet is to make your own broth. You can toss like trimmings from carrots and celery from your other cooking, even kale ribs and broccoli stalks. Throw them in some water and put it in a pot and just let it simmer. And this can help you make your own broth so it's very low in sodium. If you want to make chicken broth, if you just add in like a chicken carcass after you eat all the chicken off of it, that can also give you a nice hearty taste to your broth. And then teas are more than just for having a cup of tea at night. You can make it as a base for a broth. Instead of water, you can use the tea, sauce, or you can even poach and steam vegetables in it. So these are some of the easiest to grow herbs in like an apartment or a house. Chives and mint are both very hardy plants and pretty difficult to kill. So if you don't have a green thumb, these are the best ones to start out with. Chives will grow almost anywhere in any condition. They're great for flavoring eggs, vegetables, and meat soups with that broth we just made in the last slide. Mint is really great for adding some flavors to tea, and then also baked potatoes, peas, and beans. The most versatile herbs you can grow inside are going to be parsley and basil. You can flavor lots of wide variety of foods with them. Parsley is really easy to grow from a seed or a sprig you get in the grocery store. It really pairs well in a lot of salads and potato dishes. Basil, one thing to focus on if you're going to put basil in your home is to make sure you get the smaller globe types, so that means smaller leaves. The larger types are going to get too big for a pot and they do better outside. As your basil gets bigger, you're going to get these nice long stalks, and it's going to be important to use dowels to support the plant as they grow. And basil, as you know, can be used in most Italian foods like pastas and soups. The most flavorful herbs you can grow in your home are going to be cilantro, or coriander as it's known to some people, or oregano. Cilantro is a very short-lived plant. You're going to need to plant new seedlings every 3 to 4 weeks to make sure you have a constant supply of it. It adds great flavor to guacamole, salsa, and a lot of Mexican dishes. Oregano is going to be really easy to grow from cuttings. So if you pick up cuttings outside from a plant you may have over there or even in the grocery store, it's just put in some water or soil and it'll grow on its own. One thing to keep in mind with oregano when you're cooking with it, Fresh oregano is going to be a lot more mild than dried oregano that you get in a spice container. So make sure you're adding in just the last few minutes of cooking, like if you're sauteing something. And it complements zucchini, chicken, and tomatoes well. So general plant care. Most plants grow well in a bright south-facing window in your home. If you don't have a south-facing window, just put in the window that gets the most sun throughout the day or in the afternoon. It's also helpful if you put all your plants in the same box or planter. It'll make it easy to move your plants around your home throughout the seasons or during the day. And then you're going to make sure you water your plants frequently, but only when the soil is dry. If the soil is still damp, you don't want to overwater them. And also make sure you're planting your plants in pots that have holes in the bottom, so any extra water can drain out. And then make sure you give plants either new soil or fertilize them every 4 to 6 months to make sure they're getting the nutrients they need to grow. And then when you're cooking with your plants, make sure you're using cookings from the new or younger sprouts. They're usually going to have the most flavor when you're cooking. And then never pluck or cut more than a third of the plant, so to allow the plant to recover and still continue to grow. Always plant, and then also, really important, always plant your mint in a separate container than your other herbs, because it causes an acidity in the soil and it'll actually kill out your other herbs.
Alright, we're going to shift our focus now to the diabetic diet. So basically, a diabetic diet limits you on simple sugars and carbohydrates because, as most people are aware, diabetes is a disorder in which we can't get the glucose into cells so they can use it as energy. It's going to be free flowing into your bloodstream, and that can cause all sorts of problems, including but not limited to diabetic ketoacidosis. So for your diet, you're going to limit those, but you're also going to have a normal amount of protein, complex carbohydrates, which take longer to break down, fiber, and unsaturated fats, not saturated fats. The restriction's always going to be dependent on the individual because not everyone's diabetes is the same, whether it's because one's type 1, one's type 2, somebody controls theirs better, it's just not as severe, it's always going to be different. And the goal is always to keep a consistent level of blood sugar, because if you have a consistent level, the more consistent it is, the easier it is to control. So we're always going to look for consistency. So as soon as an individual finds out they have diabetes, they know it has something to do with sugar, or they're taught it has something to do with sugar, they're going to say, okay, no more candy, I can't do candy anymore, I can't do pastries, I can't have my cookies, I can't do this, no soda, and then other carbohydrates, bread's a big carbohydrate, all the potatoes, especially the fried kind, or chips, can't really do those as much anymore. So I'll just have a bunch of fruit. But a lot of people don't realize that fruit can be extremely high in carbohydrates. It depends on the fruit, and we'll look at that later, but some fruits you may say, oh, I know they're healthy because they've got all this stuff, they got so much fiber, they got, it's not just a cookie or candy, so I can just have this fruit, but it has this carbohydrate level that can sometimes have a negative effect on your blood sugar. So, when it comes to diabetes and blood sugar, it's like this whole big math problem. There's a bunch of stuff that has to happen. So there's 3 different factors. The first one, which most people have heard of this portion, they'll hear this word and don't really know what it means. It's glycemic index. And that's the value that indicates how quickly the food increases your blood glucose. It's out of 100 because 100 would be glucose. If it's less than 50, it's considered low, and if it's greater than 50, it's considered high. Pretty simple over there. Then we're going to go on to net carbs, and this is per serving. It's always going to be per serving because serving size is very important. And the net carbs are just the total carbs minus dietary fiber. So the more fiber a fruit has, the less net carbs it'll have, even if it has a decent number of total carbs. Then we're going to go on to glycemic load, which brings all of these 2 things together. It's going to be the glycemic index divided by 100 multiplied by the net carbs. And this is scaled by 10 or less being low, 11 to 19 being medium, and 20 plus being high. So as the other 2, it relates to glycemic index and the carbohydrates per serving. And it's an interesting thing because high glycemic index food can have low glycemic load if the net carbs are low due to the mass of the fruit itself. More dense fruit are going to have higher glycemic load, and the more fiber it has, the less total net carbs that it has. And an example is watermelon. Watermelon, the GI, which is the glycemic index, is 72. That's pretty high. That's pretty close to 100. But the net carbs are only 152 grams per cup, giving it a glycemic load of 7.2, which is considered low. It's below 10. This is a chart that I found. Almost every fruit that you'll come in contact with, commonly at least, a couple of them that aren't as common, mangoes are very seasonal, papayas aren't extremely popular, but they're all listed in order from the highest glycemic index to the lowest, and in columns. Column 1 is the fruit itself, the second is the glycemic index, then we have the net carbs per serving, and then the glycemic load with a little letter. L is low, N is medium, and H is high. And then we continue that, and we get to the end where we have really low ones such as grapefruit, plum, and sweet cherries. So an overview of this chart, if you didn't feel like reading the whole thing, it's a lot of information. For the most part, when you find fruits that are canned with syrup, especially the heavy syrups, those are going to be very high in glycemic load. The lowest glycemic load fruits that we find are plums, sweet cherries, grapefruit, kiwi, and strawberries, plums being the lowest at 1.7. The highest glycemic load fruits are going to be apricots, raisins, which are dried, canned peaches, prunes, which are also dried, and dried apricots. You see a trend there between whole fruits and dried fruits, which is the next point. Of dried fruits have a higher glycemic load than their whole fruit counterpart. We can look at grapes, 6.5, that's low. Raisins, 20.4, that's high. That's an extreme increase because it's based on the serving size, and grapes are a lot less dense, so you'll have less grapes per serving size than raisins. You'll have more raisins per serving size because they're a lot more dense. They don't have that water, that mass that keeps them from having a lower net carb. And then you look at plums, which 1.7, that's the lowest on that whole entire chart. And then you look at prunes, 32.4. That is the highest on that chart. Between the same fruit, same exact thing, just one is dried and one is whole. It's pretty interesting. And the most important thing, as I've been stressing this whole entire time, is to pay attention to the net carbs and the serving size. A big reason why plums are the lowest glycemic load is that they're very high in fiber. Because everyone knows prunes. Older people eat prunes because it has a lot of fiber. But they come from plums, so plums also have a lot of fiber. They just are less massive, and per serving size, they have less net carbs, so they're going to have a lower glycemic load. And that's our project.
That's our project. Thanks for listening.